So to talk a little bit more about density, development, and what the future holds, I would like to welcome up some of our panelists this evening, and we will need some microphones. But I would like to first welcome up Mr. Scott Ballstedt. He's the Director of Planning for the Town of Windsor. He manages all of the land use planning, development review, and building programs for the town. He's got 30 years of planning experience, and we're grateful to have you here representing Windsor. Take a seat there, and then we'll get you a mic. And then I'd also like to welcome up Mr. Bob Paulson. Bob is the planning manager for the city of Loveland. He has over 30 years of experience as an urban planner in both the public and private sector. He's here to represent the city of Loveland. And Mr. Don Toronto, the Public Works Department Director for the town of Timnath. He's a licensed professional engineer and president of TST Inc. Consulting. He's been contracted and worked for Timnath over the last 10 years. I was sorry to say that our representative from the city of Fort Collins notified us late today that they would not be able to make it due to illness, but I did get some responses from them as it pertains to some of these questions. But let's talk a little bit about development, and I'll go in order, Scott, and talk a little bit more about what are the current priorities of focus area of impact for your area, your city, or your town right now as it pertains to development.
Sure, thank you. And actually it ties into what you were just talking about with density just a minute ago. Our comp plan, when it was last updated in 2016, really stressed the need for Windsor to diversify our housing stock. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry about that. Our comprehensive plan really stresses that we should be diversifying our housing stock and actually looking at more density and multifamily projects, like you mentioned, not only for the affordability and the just being able to serve different members of our community, but also from a water standpoint, it obviously reduces our water obligation. So our comprehensive plan really is stressing the higher density, and we're currently going through a comprehensive plan update, and we'll be probably diving even deeper into that as well. So that's probably the biggest thing that our comprehensive plan is stressing.
That's awesome. I'd like to go to Bob. I'd like to ask you the same question. What are the current priorities and focus areas of impact for the city of Loveland and the future of the city of Loveland?
Well, Brandon, I sound like a broken record here, much like Windsor and many of the things that you were talking about. Certainly, density is a factor. We wrote a new zoning ordinance 4 years ago, and we made sure that there was allowance for new product types in that ordinance, including going down as small as micro homes. But what we're seeing among the home builders and those that are actually building and the developers is the continued desire for smaller lots, not necessarily smaller homes, but smaller lots, increased product type, attached units, that type of thing. So density, small lot, certainly the city is very concerned about attainable housing, working very hard on affordable housing. Some of the areas that we are very interested in Loveland is downtown. You may have been reading about that recently with the Draper project and parking structure. We're also seeing home building in all areas of the community. One of the things that I was talking to Scott right before we started here today, and he indicated that there's not a lot of building activity or new permits being issued in Windsor. We still have permits that are being applied for on a weekly basis. You know, we have slowed from the sort of the top of what we were experiencing a year ago or more, but a pretty steady permit subscription. We're seeing home building. I think Loveland has been behind the curve a little bit in the region in terms of home building, at least for its size. And I think now that developers and builders, both regional and national, are discovering Loveland, and there's a lot of land availability.
I'm just curious before we move on to Don, of the majority of the proposals that you're seeing and coming to review, based off of, is there any percentage or an allocation of how much attached product versus single family detached? Do you have any reference there?
I can tell you, I don't have those percentages off the top of my head, but there is a lot more interest in the attached product than we were experiencing in years past. And I think that we will keep seeing that grow in percentage. And it's just a fact that the cost of construction, the cost of land, the cost of water, all those factors are driving prices up, and many developers are trying to hit that sweet spot, and home builders, and that price keeps rising.
Yep. Well, thank you. Would you mind passing the mic over to Don? Don, you guys have a lot of things going on. There's been a lot of dirt movement in Timnath, a lot of projects of interest. I'm curious, what really are the focus areas of impact for the town of Timnath?
You're right. There's been a lot of activity in Timnath, and some of the major areas that we're focusing on is trying to stay ahead of the development with major capital improvement projects and things to support development. Our Harmony Corridor, if anybody's driven that, and they probably have, there are times of the day that's a little less friendly. We're doing everything we can to try to stay ahead of that. And so the CIP component of this is very important, and we're seeing the same things that Scott and Bob talked about as far as multifamily development. And Timnath is small. We're the small sister to all of these other groups, but we're seeing some of the same needs as far as smaller lots and multifamily development. So that's on the radar, and it's happening.
Perfect. I'll leave. You want to say something?
Well, I was just going to say, when you were asking about the percentage of multifamily versus single family, Windsor had a really unique 2022 in that obviously the single family homes fell off after the interest rates went up, like you described. But we had enough multifamily projects in the works and in the pipeline that we actually, for the first time, we permitted more dwelling units in multifamily than we did single family this year. So which is very, I guess, record breaking for Windsor, because for years we've always been a bedroom community, and single family detached homes is what we built. But over the last 4 or 5 years, we have seen a much bigger percentage of multifamily.
I'll ask you the next question. You've touched on a lot of that, in that last statement, but how has residential development changed in other ways, and what do you think the current challenges are, and what do you think the potential opportunities are? Is there anything, in addition to what you've already said that you want to highlight?
I guess the changes, you've really touched on a lot of them. We did also update our land use code in 2020, and we modeled a lot of the new land use code off of the Rain Dance project, which got into some varied lot sizes, smaller lot sizes, mixed use ideas. And so that project went through a PUD process. We tried to amend the land use code to make it simpler to go through that and implement some of those ideas in future projects. And we're starting to see some developers take advantage of those.
Yeah, Bob, how about you for Loveland? What really has changed? Is there anything massive that you've seen change other than what you talked about with attached and detached product?
Well, again, as I mentioned, smaller lots, more product type. Many of the developments that we're looking at, new subdivision designs and those in the entitlement process, are looking at multiple product types ranging from multifamily down to duplex type units, townhomes, and then single family on smaller lots, and then sometimes with a little bit larger lot. And we're also seeing a lot more interest in having kind of that open space amenities, not necessarily manicured amenities, but trails and open space areas that are just left pretty natural. We also, and I have to speak to Don's concern about the roadway situation. The city of Loveland, especially those of you who have driven on Highway 34 Eisenhower in Loveland recently at rush hour, you'll notice that there's a great deal of work going on there, and we're trying to keep up with that situation, not simply on Highway 34, but across the city, and it does require a great deal of capital expenditure to keep up. But in general, we're just seeing the interest in developers and builders trying to reach the market by making homes a little bit smaller, often attached, and smaller lots.
Yeah. Well, thank you for those points. Don, I'd like to know, from your perspective with the town of Timnath, what really has changed? What are the opportunities and what are the challenges that you guys currently face?
Well, it's similar to what Scott and Bob talked about. I mean, we're seeing the demand for multifamily, lower price points, and those sort of things. I think our challenge a lot of the times is educating the public as it relates to how multifamily and or more density relates to their single family, because we're obviously more single family than multifamily. And so the general thought process that we hear back is that multifamily will drive down their home values of the single family. That's just not true, but that's what people believe, and we're trying to counter that with education and understanding. But every time multifamily projects come in, we have a lot of dialogue about that. And so I think that's one of the challenges in the future, just to educate everybody.
I found it very interesting that, Timnath, and obviously the number of sales as a percentage are smaller than the bigger cities, but you guys came in trailing behind Boulder only, even ahead of Fort Collins in terms of attached to detached product. And I thought that was a very interesting statistical point. And I don't know if that caught you by surprise.
It definitely did. I did not know that, but it's encouraging because that's exactly what our comp plan wanted to do. We want the diversification because we understand that strengthens the community, and we want to just educate everybody to that. It isn't common knowledge, and so the educational component of this, I can't stress it enough. And it's if you have some magic pills or ways to get that education out there, we'd like to buy some from you.
There you go. I'm actually going to go back to Bob in the middle. I think it's always interesting, and the people here would love to know, what projects and note are really defining or changing the future of the specific projects. I just saw some news today that there was, potential for a Whole Foods going in Loveland. I won't put you on the spot there, but I'm just curious from your perspective of what are the projects of note that are really shaping the future? Well,
that project that you're mentioning that includes Whole Foods, it's proposed. It's just in the proposal stage, but that's very exciting. It's a McWhinney project that will be part of Santerre if it goes through. I can't remember the acreage. I think it's about 150 acres. It includes a 40,000 square foot grocery store and quite a bit of other commercial, and then multifamily and a smaller mix of single-family detached and attached units. But that is going to be on the south side of Highway 34, right across from the Gateway, the Target area. So that's a big project for the city. We're excited about that opportunity. Another project that I'm sure most people in this audience know about is Kinston, another McWhinney project, and they're not the only developer in Loveland by any means, but they have really worked to create kind of a town center in their Kinston project. And one of the things I was going to mention is what are the opportunities with these smaller lots and increased densities and perhaps the amenity packages that go with that. It creates the opportunity for more walkable communities. People would say friction in a positive way. You get to be able to walk to, whether it's walking on a trail system or walking for a cup of coffee or something like that. But I think we're seeing an interest in the community in those kinds of amenities and walkability that perhaps wasn't so important 10 years ago, 15 years ago, but it's certainly growing in importance.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. And honestly, in this, it doesn't have to just be centered, around residential. I also am interested in commercial from all of you. But Scott, what projects of note for Windsor are really on the horizon and are really making a major impact in the future?
Well, I think you mentioned rain dance earlier, and that's really been the driver of a lot of our residential building permits over the last 5 years. We actually thought that project would build out a little more slowly, like Water Valley built out over 10 years, and Water Valley South built out over 10 years, and rain dance built out in less than half of that. And so I think we'll see a little bit of a lull right now while Raindance is building out and the Ridge at Harmony Road is building out. But we do have a lot of, I think our next growth area will be north of Main Street, north of, between Highway 257 and Weld County Road 15, and south of Weld County Road 72. It's just northwest of Windsor Lake. The Prairie Song development is a Hartford community that they've got a master plan for, I believe, almost 3,000 units, or not 3,000, 3,000 units when combined with the two projects to the south of them. There's an Overland annexation and Trevena annexation, and they're all in that same area just north of New Windsor, if you're familiar with that neighborhood. And a combined 3,000 units in that area is really probably we're going to see our most growth over the next 10 to 15 years.
Yeah, that's exciting.
Yeah, from a commercial standpoint, our economic development team is working on a lot of different projects. The big one that's always in the news and is kind of in fits and starts moving forward is the Future Legends Sports Complex. We meet weekly with their team, and they are moving forward on various aspects of the project. And I know there was an article yesterday that talked about playing baseball and soccer in May, and that's an ambitious goal. We're really working hard with them to try and make that a reality, but they do have their sports dome up, and they're actively hosting soccer tryouts and volleyball, and so it's exciting to see them be able to take advantage of a small portion of the site, and then the rest of the site's still very much an active construction project. So.
Yeah. Well, Don, maybe a little smaller in size, but you guys don't have any shortage of projects going on. I'm a Timnath resident, and so I see a lot of them. But what projects are really shaping the area for Timnath for the future?
Well, on the residential side, we've got long-time projects like Timnath Ranch and Harmony, and the project that's just about to, that is breaking ground, is the Lakes that is just north of Harmony, and that's going to be bringing a lot more residential components to the table here real soon. But all the existing developments are doing very well. The commercial component of it is the exciting part of a lot of different things, because we've got the Harmony Corridor, which is now just starting to develop, and we're excited about that. The commercial corridor along I-25 and the Harmony intersection, obviously has some nice retail there right now, but there's a lot more potential, and so that's front and center for us at the moment, looking at the future for those, and they do create some traffic. And we're ahead of that, we hope, also.
Awesome. I'm gonna stay with you real quick, Don. I think water is something we talked about last year in our forecast, and I think it kind of gets put to the back of people's mind. But water is a very precious resource, and its cost and its access to the water is continued to be a challenge for Northern Colorado. I'm curious what's the current role of water in Timnath, and how that becomes a challenge or an opportunity for you as you guys look forward into the future.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Timnath is in a little bit different situation than either Windsor or Loveland, in that we don't have that utility. I mean, we look to existing districts like the Fort Collins Loveland Water District and the Elko Water District and North Weld to provide that. So we partner with those folks very well. We talk to them all the time about the growth and about how to make that work for both them and us. But at the same time, we're very aggressive in going after non-pot systems. And so the town is pushing that with all the town's components, and we try to influence developers to add non-pot systems whenever they can. So we think that has a significant influence on the amount of potable water that's needed. So we're going to continue to do that, and we're going to continue to champion that from the town's perspective.
We'll come back to Bob and ask you the same question of, really the current role of water in Loveland, and how that's a challenge or an opportunity, and what things maybe you guys might be doing creatively behind the scenes to try to address it.
Certainly. Well, I think in northern Colorado, water is going to be an increasing challenge, and it's perhaps going to be increasingly expensive. The city of Loveland has done a great job in terms of planning for securing water resources for the future. But I think there's recognition recently. We have a task force that was just initiated by one of our council members to look at, particularly look at the water coming from the west slope. And I think we get about 40% of our city water resources from the west slope water. So there is a concern as the climate gets drier and hotter, as predicted, that that source of water may diminish. And so the city is looking in kind of an overall picture and long-term way to figure out exactly how we can secure more water. We do have a reservoir project, Chimney Hollow, that is in the works, that is shared with a number of other communities and entities. So I think we're in good shape for the future, but I think there's a growing awareness that we have to be very careful. And from a planning perspective, generally the city has not been, we've been pretty good and lenient in terms of our water use. We do have and water restrictions, but there's a growing interest in having more water-wise land use, and I think that we'll be pursuing amendments to our code in the second half of the year in just trying to facilitate a better, more water-wise orientation. Mm-hmm. So it is a big deal, but I think we've planned well, and we will continue to take additional steps.
When all said and done, how long will it take to complete? Obviously, Chimney Hollow has been a long project. You guys, any estimates? I mean, I know that you're not.
You're asking the wrong person.
That's what
the work is, the front end of trying to get approvals for the reservoirs is very lengthy, and I think this might be the only reservoir, it's certainly on the Front Range, that is being constructed at the present time. But I think it's just a few years away from being functional. I know that there's work ongoing, and it started last year. So we're looking forward to that, but I can't give you the time frame.
Gotcha. Scott, how about for you in terms of the current role of water with the town of Windsor, and how you guys see it as an opportunity or a challenge, and what you guys are doing to address some of those concerns?
Well, like Timnath, we have three different, we have water, we get our water from Loveland Fort Collins Water District on the west side of town. The northern part of Windsor is served by the North Weld County Water District. And then the core area of town we serve ourselves. But we get our water from Greeley, from North Weld, and from the districts on the west. This is where I would normally turn to our water resources manager and turn it over to him. I know that with NISP on the horizon and having those obligations that we see coming at us, we'll probably be looking at, I think the town board will be evaluating our water policy monthly, just to make sure that we're making the right decisions in terms of what we're requiring when development comes to town. We either require cash in lieu of water, or we require that they dedicate raw water shares. And so I think it's really going to be not, pardon the pun, but a really fluid situation where the town board is looking at our policy very closely and just making sure that we're being as wise as we can. And similar to what Loveland's doing, we're looking at our code. When we did the code update a couple of years ago, we did add some water-wise elements, and they are none of them are mandatory, but I think we're probably going to be looking at some higher standards for watering. We also, as Timnath, we promote non-potable irrigation systems whenever the land was previously irrigated crop. And so almost all of the subdivisions that we've been working on over the last 25 years have non-potable irrigation systems, and so that does reduce the amount of treated water that is used on landscape. So.
Fantastic. We're almost out of time, but I wanted to give each of you an opportunity to share some final thoughts of what do you think is important to communicate to end consumers or end residents of your town, and potentially to the developers, or any final thoughts that you want to share from your perspective as you guys look at the future of your cities and what you'd like people to know or what you'd like the developers to know from your perspective. You can take it in whatever order, whoever's ready.
Oh, no. I want to hear this first.
Yeah.
I'm looking at my notes.
Yeah, just any final thoughts from your perspective, from the perspective of Loveland. And I'm also curious about how much collaboration goes on amongst you guys, and the collaboration of the different towns, cities, and municipalities. I'm curious from that side of the planning and development.
We're kind of sneaky about that. We look at what other cities are doing in terms of their initiatives, but we do have some coordination. But I think I don't know how it works for the two of you, but we're pretty. The issues that we're trying to tackle successfully are consuming enough that we're not spending a great deal of time. We do coordinate with other communities, but we're really looking to see what changes they're making and what ideas that they have all along, up and down the Front Range from Denver and suburbs north. So we're aware of, Scott, what you've been doing, but we're also very focused on our own issues. So and I'll talk about some of the things that, as long as I have the mic, and Don is reluctant over there, which I find to be very unusual. But in any case, we are concerned also about the high interest rates and state of the economy. And I think the city of Loveland is, I know the city of Loveland is very concerned about attainable housing, making sure, like you mentioned, the millennials, housing is available for folks that are coming into our workforce or have been in our workforce. I think the city council and city staff are very concerned about that. And that's one reason why we're looking to develop more allowances for small lot and attached product development and multifamily. Also, we're very concerned about the homeless situation. You may have read in the press across the board in northern Colorado, communities are working to deal with that, and as we are in Loveland, looking to provide some form of assistance to affordable housing developments or developments that have affordable housing components within them. So that's been very important to us. One thing I wanted to mention, and this is something that we have seen recently, and this is a little bit out of sequence here, but we have seen a number of subdivisions coming in or being proposed, or people talking to us about rental subdivisions, and that seems to be a trend that is growing across the board. So we're expecting to see more of that. None of us have mentioned that yet this evening, but that seems to be something that is happening in response to the economy.
You're referencing the build for rent communities?
Subdivisions that are built for rent, whether single-family detached or more commonly in a duplex type setting, so that you get your own unit, so to speak, and perhaps a piece of yard, but you are eventually you're a renter that is living there, but full neighborhoods to that effect. So I think that's something that we'll be seeing up in northern Colorado more of in the coming years. But anyway, those were some of the things I wanted to mention. I also wanted to mention, and I'm not trying to hog the mic, but one of the areas that we're really focusing on, and I hope Water Valley and Martin Lind are successful in this, along with the ranch, Larimer County, in expanding the county's facility here and having associated development that's very important to tourism in not just Loveland, but the vicinity for all of us. And certainly Windsor has done a really excellent job as we move a little bit to the east in that area. And so that's something that we're really looking forward to, is to furthering the facilities here at the ranch, and as well as facilities like this that are private. And I'll stop.
Did he give you some primer?
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
That helped a lot, Bob. I appreciate it. So I think one of the things that people can expect from Timnath in the future is that we're going to be just like the other communities in terms of having more diversification of product. All the developers that are in Timnath want more diversification. I think the public wants more diversification. You're going to see that. I think the other thing you're going to see is that I think Timnath's small, we're very nimble, and I think we're very creative. And so you're going to see a lot of different things happening there, and I think the velocity of it, I think, is going to be significant also. Even though it's much smaller, the numbers are smaller than the surrounding communities, I think we're going to be very competitive to get all those things. And on another note, just for cooperative natures, Timnath Public Works, we have an IGA with Loveland, and so they do all the maintenance on all our vehicles and plows and things like that, which really has helped the town, and I think it helps Loveland a little bit, and I think it creates a spirit of cooperation, which is helpful, and I think there should be more of that, actually. But I think the future is bright for Northern Colorado, and Timnath hopes to be right in the middle of that.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing. Scott, you want to wrap us up here?
Yeah, I just would piggyback on what they were saying. We've got intergovernmental agreements with both Loveland and Timnath as well, and we've collaborated quite a bit in the Brands area out here, and with regard to Fairgrounds Avenue, trying to make sure that it won't look like two different communities, one on each side of that it'll be planned seamlessly. And then I also wanted to point out another area of collaboration that Loveland's Housing Authority has been just great for Windsor, because we had a small town housing authority several years ago, and we partnered with Loveland's Housing Authority and have worked very closely with them, and they've helped us to apply for grant funding for senior housing projects. We do have a couple of projects that we're hoping to get built in Windsor in the near future, but I just would be remiss if I didn't say that Loveland's been great to work with from the Housing Authority standpoint as well. But like Don said, I think we really do have a bright future. We've got a lot of cool projects in the works, and can't wait to see them come to fruition.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all of you gentlemen. I really appreciate your insights. Can we give these guys a round of applause?